in the beginning of the book, I explained that the heroine, through her blog art, she has blog posts that she kind of reviews Bollywood movies, that she focuses on the 90s, which is considered the modern golden age of Bollywood film. And I feel like anything past that, you start getting into these really problematic nationalist films that perpetuate a political message.
Hey everyone, welcome to Immigrantly. I'm your host Sadia Khan. Today we are going to be talking to Nisha Sharma. In 2018, Nisha released her first book, a novel called My So-Called Bollywood Life, to great acclaim. Nisha excellently draws upon traditional Bollywood themes to tell you the story of Indian-American teen Winnie Mehta as she deals with heartbreak and new love and her passion for film. Nisha recently released the first book of her new series, the Singh Trilogy. She's an active blogger. She has a full-time job, and she recently won the RITA Award for the Best Young Adult Romance. Nisha, I'm so excited to have you here with us today. So let's jump right in. You were a pre-med student at college. Then you ended up going to law school, and now you are a published author with 2 books, right?
Yes.
Have you always been a writer, and who in your family was most encouraging of your passion?
Yes, I've had a couple changes in my career. First of all, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I did pre-med for a year. My father is this multi-generation physician. We go back multiple years for doctors in our family. So of course, pre-med was the natural choice. And throughout the whole process, though, I was always a writer. I used to publish short stories when I was in high school, and I wrote fan fiction a lot when I was younger. And then when I got into college and I switched out of pre-med, I ended up aggressively pursuing my passion for writing. So I tell people that I became a career writer at that point, even though I was going through school, and I ended up, going through law school and working in corporate after that. But I've always written, and that drive to be a published writer never changed.
And as a kid and as a young adult, were you always embracing of your South Asian heritage? Did that relationship take time to evolve?
I have to say that I grew up with incredibly supportive. I guess that's the second part of your first question. I grew up with very supportive parents. I grew up with very supportive extended family. And although they always used to say, choose a career that will make you money and then pursue your passion until your passion also makes you as much money, because they approach it from a very realistic, culturally influenced mindset. But they never discouraged me from writing. And because of the way that I was raised with, always knowing that, every single part of myself was completely accepted by the people that I love and that love me, I never questioned my identity. And I have to say, I'm probably one of the few that's been fortunate enough to always think like it's completely normal to bring chutney cucumber sandwiches to lunch in high school. But that I have to say, I've been incredibly blessed to just never have that issue.
It's so interesting because I was on your blog. I was reading through some of your blog articles, and you talk about your mom's recipes, which we will talk about in a little bit. But you talk about like chutney on toast and then keema. And it just reminded me of, when I was growing up. And chutney is one of those things which you can just put on anything, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it tastes delicious. Nisha, moving on, you talk about on your website how you manage your day job and your writing. What is your day job?
So after law school, I worked in government contracts, and I ended up moving into diversity and inclusion. So my day job is pretty much, the same as what my personal passion is, making sure that people of color and underrepresented groups have a voice and have their whole identities accepted and included in this world. So
let's talk about your book.
Sure.
My So-Called Bollywood Life. How did you think of the idea for My So-Called Bollywood Life, and when did inspiration really strike?
So I wrote My So-Called Bollywood Life as part of my MFA thesis. So after law school,
Oh.
yeah. So after law school, I decided to go back to school because, I tell people all the time, if I could be a career student, I would prefer to be a career student because I loved school. I had to write a novel for my MFA, which I was getting part-time while I was working. And the MFA kind of, gave you this structure like, okay, you have to write a book and, it has to have these components and approach it like you would approach a thesis paper. So that's
Hmm.
how I approached my novel. I approached it like a thesis paper. So I wanted to accomplish a few specific things when I wrote this book. The first was I wanted to write a novel, which I personally hadn't seen on the shelves, about a heroine who was completely comfortable with her identity,
Hmm.
similar to the way that I grew up, because I felt like there wasn't enough of that representation on the shelves. The second is I wanted to write a book where the heroine had a very positive relationship with her parents, similar to the way that I had a positive relationship with mine. Because a lot of the times when you read South Asian fiction, the parents represent tradition and the hero and heroine represent a modern change of culture, and they're always at odds. But I wanted to make sure that, there are stories out there that they don't have to be at odds. They can move and change and evolve together. And the third thing is that, there's a lot of different takes on what Bollywood means, what Bollywood is, and it's kind of become this word that is used. I think for South Asians in general, it's a catch-all phrase, and the true meaning and the true definition is lost. And how it's the Hindi language film industry in India, and it has affected generations and generations of people in the way that we, view film and entertainment. So I wanted to really explore something like that. And My So-Called Bollywood Life came out of those three principles and really developed into what I like to tell people as the love letter to my younger self, because it has these three things that I valued so much growing up. And on top of that, it's about a heroine who's so sure and so confident in what she wants to do. And that's how I always wished I was. But, I was a normal teenager, and, we all go through growing pains. So that's kind of how the book evolved.
Talking about Bollywood, how did you tackle some of the issues that Bollywood film industry faces, like
Hmm.
some of the problematic aspects of Bollywood, like
Sure.
sexism and objectification of women and
Right.
lack of representation of wider India, broader India? I just see like specific regions of India that are more represented
Sure.
in Bollywood. And even when we look at social class,
Hmm.
there's a certain social class that it appeals to. So how did you
Sure.
address that?
So because the book is a young adult novel, a lot of the personal opinions and perspectives that the heroine has
Hmm.
are very rose-tinted glasses. But she does reference specific things in Bollywood that she doesn't agree with, and she feels, need to be addressed, or, that people shouldn't live their lives believing. And, they're part of Bollywood and she accepts it, but she doesn't agree with it. So like item numbers are something that
Hmm.
she doesn't like because it's objectivizes women. And, why are we still having item numbers? That's the question. I don't understand why there's, still like most of the time they don't even have a purpose anymore. They evolved from like pieces in movies where, they built the element of suspense between the hero and heroine during the item number to now literally just objectifying the woman.
Yeah.
So that's one. And then, the other thing is in the beginning of the book, I explained that the heroine, through her blog art, she has blog posts that she kind of reviews Bollywood movies, that she focuses on the 90s, which is considered the modern golden age of Bollywood film. And I feel like anything past that, you start getting into these really problematic nationalist
Yeah.
films that perpetuate a political message. And, not to say that there's zero good films after like 2000, there are tons of, really good movies that talk about class and representation and sexism, and but again they're few and far between
Yeah.
versus like the overall body of the movies that have come out. So the 90s kind of, was, where you have the group dances, and it's like really the rose tinted glasses would make sense. Having a character who has rose tinted glasses would make sense if she likes those particular movies in that area.
Even early 2000s, I remember movie Veer Zara.
Yeah.
It was like cross border,
Right.
focusing on peace, promoting that message. And now, as you mentioned, movies have become a lot more nationalistic.
Hmm.
We see this like misplaced nationalistic fervor. Why do you think, Nisha, that is the case now versus like 10 years ago?
So it could be the chicken before the egg, where it could be that film is perpetuating a message that's affecting society, or it could be society that's creating this message and then it's affecting the films that are representing the times. So I think because of the political turmoil that's currently happening in India, a lot of the films are trying to create a and I put it in air quotes, a real view of like what some of the issues are, but they're not. They are completely slanted with a political message based on honestly whoever is probably funding the film, and whether it's aggravating the political situation, I'm not sure because here in the U.S. I think we get a very filtered message of what's really happening over there. And when I talk to family members over there, they also feel like, there's just this tension. And I think, you feel that tension a little bit in the movies that are coming out. So, which honestly, every Bollywood fan that I've talked to recently, whenever we have like a discussion, even some of the scholars that I had consulted who are now friends of mine, who study Bollywood film as, an actual, through universities and where they teach film, they all say the same thing. The film industry has now become almost like a media outlet where it's just producing a message,
Yeah.
you know and hopefully it'll go back to being an entertainment, like it'll be focused on entertainment while also creating positive, real stories that we can all connect with in a way that doesn't focus so much on politics, but on social issues of the people.
And I grew up in Pakistan, and
Hmm.
I grew up with Bollywood movies, and I cannot relate to them anymore. And
Yeah,
it's sad. It just saddens me because every time I go through list of new releases, I'm like, what should I
I
watch?
know, right?
Because it's like
Yeah,
if my religion is being vilified in almost every Bollywood movie,
yeah,
then I just don't want to watch that.
right.
What has been response from readers of your book?
I think I've been so fortunate to have readers who really either have never heard of Bollywood before come to me and say, I've never been introduced to the film industry. Where should I start? And I always tell them to start with the 90s. That, they feel like they've been opened up to a new culture in a positive way where they feel like they aren't being fed something that's been filtered through a lot of different like interpretations. They feel like, okay, this is real. This is something that like is from an own voice's author. So I've had that, and I think the most rewarding ones are the readers who have come to me who are South Asian and who have been brought up in the U.S. and who say that, you know what, I felt like I haven't found a book that focuses on the positive upbringing that South Asians can, experience in the US, and I feel like I found it in your book. So I've been super fortunate and really humbled by the experience of, talking to readers who have, come from either end, whether they've known Bollywood or their entire lives or have never experienced it before.
Nisha, I should have asked this question in the beginning, but you were born and raised in the US,
I
right?
was, yeah.
How integral was Bollywood part of your, childhood or growing up? Because I can understand, like in Pakistan or even in India, it's different, right? We're
Sure.
exposed to these movies a lot more.
Sure.
But since you grew up here, how integral was that? Not just but your friends, South
Sure.
Asian friends, and others.
My mom actually came over from India first, my mom's family. She came over when she was about 13,
Oh.
and she moved to Queens, New York. And in Queens, they found a very robust community of South Asians, and their culture and identity, and everything was so preserved. So when she'd go back to India, it felt like there was no lapse in, in upbringing. Like she felt like, her and her cousins could communicate the same as if she had been brought up and raised in India. But then I grew up in Northeast Pennsylvania. And so, funny enough, my culture was still, I felt like, preserved in the small Indian community we had found in Northeast PA, just a few hundred families. But my parents used to speak to us in Hindi. I ate Indian food every night, for dinner, and we'd have Bollywood movies playing all the time on weekends. We would celebrate American holidays, and then they would become this, indie-fied holiday experience. So every Thanksgiving to date, I swear to God, this still happens. After dinner, everyone's like, well, what should we watch? Let's watch a movie. What should we watch? And my uncle and my mother will always say, Sholay, let's watch Sholay. So for 30 years or something, we've been watching Sholay after Thanksgiving dinner. So, and I think also the other thing is I was trained as a Kathak dancer. So I learned Kathak classical Indian dance since I was 7. So from 7 to, I think, when I was in college, it was that experience of training where you have to understand the myths and the history behind Kathak. Like that also, I was constantly studying it and exposed to it, and then watching old Bollywood films where they actually used to have Kathak classical pieces in the movies. I think that also helped preserve. I feel like preserve is the wrong word to use, but it also helped shape a lot of my my South Asian experience growing up.
So, Bollywood Life recently won an award, the RITA Award for
did.
Best Young Adult Romance. What does this award mean to you, and what is the significance of you having won it?
The RITA Award is considered the gold standard award for romance fiction, and it is something that ever since I joined RWA, I was 19 when I joined because that's when I wanted to be a career writer. So, of course, you join the one organization that connects you with other romance writers. Ever since I was 19, I knew that I wanted to win a RITA. And it's, a wonderful experience to not only have your book celebrated in the genre, but it also opens you up to opportunities because it kind of validates you as a professional writer in a lot of ways. There's many things that validate you as a writer, and a lot of it has to be self-validation, which of course is something that a lot of writers struggle with, such as myself. But this is like one of those milestones that I've always had in the back of my mind as something that is part of, my validation. And so when I won it, first of all, I couldn't stop crying because they announced my name and I was just a mess. And I was like, I'm not going to cry. There's no way. I'm not a crier. There's no way. And I lost it. And I think it's because that moment was such a huge it was so huge for me and also for the romance writing community because I was the first South Asian to ever win a RITA award. And there are so many South Asian writers who had come before me who had been nominated but had never reached that step. So I felt like I was getting something that honestly the first should have gone to, Nalini Singh or to Sonali Dev, who are both amazing writers who have been nominated in the past. And then, I was just so humbled by the experience of My So-Called Bollywood Life resonated with readers to the point where I was able to be honored with this award for it. So I have to say that it was definitely a moment. I think for 2 weeks afterwards, my husband and I were celebrating.
Let's talk about Singh Trilogy.
Sure.
What is that book all about, and how do you compare it to My So-Called Bollywood Life?
So My So-Called Bollywood Life is young adult, but the Singh Trilogy is a contemporary romance, and it's considered a legal thriller. And the reason why I wanted to write it is because I've always thought of myself as an adult romance writer. I never really thought I would write a young adult book, but, through the MFA process, it felt like the right story to tell for, a high school student. But the Singh Trilogy incorporates a lot of my adult a lot of my experiences as in corporate America. As in my 20s, I worked very closely with C-level executives. I worked very closely with presidents of organizations, and you see a lot of the decisions that go on behind the scenes that you would never experience, I think, if you were like a couple levels below. So I've always been fortunate enough to work at so closely with executive leadership. And I also love the trope, the billionaire trope. So, there's tons of tropes in romance, and it's like secret baby, there's billionaires, there's like, like the Duke and the Duchess, and so, but I've always loved the billionaire trope. And I thought to myself at one point, like, okay, I want to write an adult romance. What kind of story do I want to tackle first? And I thought to myself, I love the billionaire trope. And there's so many South Asian billionaires. Why is there no South Asian billionaire romance?
Yeah, that's
So
true.
so that was kind of, where my thought process had gone. And I was like, the story, the takeover effect is the first in a trilogy about three brothers who are trying to preserve the immigrant dream for their father, who had become a tech billionaire,
Huh.
because he was brilliant at code, and he came over. He started a company. He registered patents, and those patents became mega money making machines. And he raised three Punjabi sons, and all of them are, very strong-willed, like alpha male Punjabi, like, sardars that you like think of, right? And the premise of the story is there is this company that is now trying to take over the father's
Oh,
organization, and the three sons are doing everything they can to protect their father's immigrant dream.
Nisha,
So
what are some of the differences between writing young adult and adult romance? What did you experience when you were writing this one versus the other one?
So young adult romance and adult romance, honestly, the process is pretty much the same. I feel like both are incredibly difficult to sit down and tell a story that adheres to the character's voice and the conflict that's true to, like, the character you're creating. So the process is very similar. The difference, I have to say, that I experienced is for YA, because it was so close to the way I grew up, and
Hmm.
my love for Bollywood. The level of research was just kind of revisiting experiences that I had in my childhood, like watching all these movies again. With adult romance, as much as I understand corporate contracts, I actually had to do a significant amount of research. So I have, of course, with the company that I work for, like, I have access to the legal team that handles mergers and acquisitions.
Mm.
So I actually sat with like peers at my organization, and I was I'm in a different department, and I was like, can I buy you coffee? And I ended up picking a lot of their brains, and just and of course researching like how the super wealthy live, which is something that it's amazing. It kind of like blew my mind how like what wealthy people do. So I had to do a lot of that research as well. So
And you also write a blog, and
I do.
one of your blog series is sharing your mom's recipes.
Yeah.
And I love that. I was looking at that. What is your favorite recipe, and why did you start that?
So I'll answer the second part of the
Yeah.
question first. So my second young adult novel, which comes out in 2021, so it's
Huh.
a few years from now, it is about a heroine who is a Kathak dancer, who tries to connect with her father through cooking, because he owns a restaurant in Chicago and her parents just got divorced, and she moves to New Jersey, and she wants to maintain the relationship with him, and the only real language that they have that's shared is food.
Mm.
So she starts cooking these recipes that were passed down through his family to try to connect with him. And I ended up thinking about it in terms of my own relationship with food and my parents, and the recipes that have been passed down, and how cooking really, is like, there's no measurements in South Asian cooking, right?
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no there's no measurements, and like, so my mom can't write them down. Like, it's kind of sitting across the kitchen counter from her
Yes.
and watching her do it and finding out, like, okay, like, this is when you taste, this is how much salt like she puts in by just like taking out her silver tin and like just scooping up like a couple like teaspoons of salt. So it's really just it was the whole process of just learning about cooking for that book was personal for me. And a lot of the and through the process of writing it and learning cooking through revisiting that food connection with my parents as an adult, I was like, I have to share some of these experiences. Like I know that there's no measurements with the way that I grew up watching my mom cooking, but like I have to figure out a way to measure it out. And so that's how I started it, to kind of create this log of these recipes that I've loved and like some of the changes that I've made, as an adult now. So that's how it started, and I totally forgot the first part of your question.
What is your favorite
Oh,
recipe?
my favorite recipe is my mom's basic pistachio malai kulfi. It's super easy. It's actually an easy recipe, but I remember her like ever since I was a child in the summer when we'd be at home after and school was out. We'd be outside playing or whatever, and we'd come in and she'd like freeze these little kulfi like in little kulfi popsicle containers for us. And growing up, like there was a period of time like in college and in law school where I wasn't really cooking a lot, but now that I'm settled, I remember calling her up like a couple of years ago and saying, I miss your malai kulfi. Like every once in a while we'll go home and she'll have it in the summer, but I want to make it. And she was kind of like, okay, well, come over. She wouldn't talk to me on the phone about it, so I came over, and since then, I have to say mine is now a little bit better than hers, but I can't really tell her that to her face.
So, do you cook regularly? Is that something that you do as well?
Yeah, I mean, because of our busy schedules, me and my husband, we tend to really spend time together and connect the most over dinner. So after we work all day, and so we've tried to make that something that we share together. So the process of like making food and sitting together and talking throughout it, like when we were kids, and how we would connect with our parents through food. So we try to do that now together.
So let's talk about your husband. You got
Sure.
married in 2019. So you have your own
Yeah.
romance story. How did you
I
guys
did.
meet?
So we are the product of the modern day arranged marriage. We are both of our parents had put our profiles up on Shaadi.com, and they had paid for our subscriptions for us, and he was a little bit better about it, and checked it himself. My mother would check it for me because I refused to look at it. And not to say that I was against it, but I just felt like I didn't have as much faith in Shaadi.com, I think, as Anil had. So Anil, he would check his profile. He saw my profile. He sent me a message, and then 2 months later we met. 3 months after that, our parents met. And then we got married. We actually eloped first.
Huh. Why?
So we eloped last year because we knew that if we were going to have a wedding, it was going to be a South Asian Punjabi wedding. And we wanted something, and we're very simple people, I think, in terms of like the way that we celebrate with friends and family. So we just texted our siblings and our best friends, and we said, meet in Central Park at this time on this date. And we went to Macy's, and I got myself like a short cocktail dress, and he got himself a suit, and we showed up. We had a ceremony in Central Park last year, and then we went out for tacos. And then the next day we told our parents what we did, and they said, you've made all your decisions, now it's time for us to make ours. And so that led to a Punjabi wedding in Udaipur in January over the course of 4 days.
But that's what I really like about South Asian weddings. It's the same in Pakistan. You'll have like 4 or 5 events. You have music, your family coming together, food.
It was a lot of fun.
It's so much fun.
Yeah.
So, Nisha, your husband is from South India and you're from North India. And people who don't know India that well may not realize that different regions in India vary significantly in terms of cultures and traditions.
Right.
How do you guys reconcile both your cultures at home?
So I think I grew up on the East Coast, and because my mom had been here since 13, she knew all of the South Asian spots basically. Like,
Yeah.
this is where we shop, this is where we eat, this is where, like, her and her family had kind of acclimated to finding the pockets of culture where they needed it. And so I grew up eating dosa. I grew up eating, like idli, and I grew up with an awareness of South Indian culture. So his family settled all the way on the West Coast in an area where there was zero
North Indians?
access to North Indians, to pretty much, and like, they were pretty isolated. So
Ah.
so they would get their cultural influence when they went back to Kerala, which is great for them to access that stuff, which is fabulous. But when Anil and I met, it was a learning experience for him, and it was a lot of fun too, because I thought I understood South Asian or South Indian like food and culture, and then like I got the authentic experience when I started eating his mom's cooking, which, by the way, she's amazing. Like, her and my mother, they need to open up a restaurant together. They're so good. But like, South Indian cooking is very spicy. And like, when you go to Dosa Hut, like, they don't make sambar as spicy as like my
Really?
mother-in-law. No. So it was like, the first time I think I ate like her food, I felt my mouth was gonna burn off, but it was so good. It was the Indian food that's so spicy that you just keep going, even though, like,
Yeah, because I thought like North Indian food, which is similar to Pakistani food, like especially in
right,
Punjab, I thought that's very spicy too.
not like South Indian
my
food.
God,
Oh my gosh,
really?
I thought I had it under control, but no. Like, when you start eating like spicy South Indian food, it is a whole other experience.
So talking about dosa, have you tried this dosa cart that's in Wash Park? I've heard so many good things about it.
I have not.
It's like there's this guy, his name is Tirukumar,
Okay.
and apparently he has this cart, like dosa cart in Wash Park, and he's
Oh,
extremely
interesting.
famous. I'm planning to go one day and have his
I have
food
to
and maybe interview
go.
him as well. But you should
Yeah.
try that.
Oh, no, definitely. I feel like what I've been doing is I've been hitting all the Baranta places. So like, I've hit like the Baranta food cart that's all the way up near Penn Station.
Oh, there's a Paratha food
Yeah,
cart?
there's a Baranta food cart as well. And then there's a Baranta Alley in Jersey City,
Really?
which is amazing.
Oh my
and
God,
then,
I'm obsessed with parathas. I should go and
Yeah.
try that.
Yeah, no, it's so good. So, and then we've also been trying the fusion food that's been cropping up in New York.
Yeah.
So like the Indian gastropub, which honestly, it's like, you can't go there expecting Indian food. Like, you have to go there expecting fusion food. So
And especially when people like you and I who've grown up with South Asian food,
Yeah.
when we go out and try it, for us, it's like it has to be really good for
Right.
it to satisfy us, I guess.
Right.
So, Nisha, where can people find your book? Is it books like, are they on Amazon, or like where can they find
Yeah,
them?
everywhere. So they're on Amazon, they're on Barnes and Noble, they're they are directly through my publisher site. You can even find them on the Target website. Like, you can get them anywhere. So.
And we will also post links to your books on our website once we release your episode.
Great.
In the end, if you were to describe America in a
Sure.
word, sentence, and you're a writer, I'm sure you'll do a great
Sure.
job of it. How would you do it?
Possibilities.
Hmm.
Possibilities. I still believe that. Even though, like, India is going through political turmoil, and America is going through the same kind of political turmoil, there's still possibilities for positive change and positive growth, and for dreams to come true. So I would say, my parents and my grandparents had their possibilities realized and their dreams realized, and hopefully that I can pass that on to my kids as well.
Thank you so much, Nisha. This was wonderful. Best of
Thanks.
luck. And
Thank you
I
so
can't
much.
wait to read the rest of your book, this one, and then your new book, which is coming out in, you said, 2021, right?
So the next young adult book is coming out in 2021.
Yeah, that's not for
and-
me, but
And then like
maybe I'll wait for another adult
I
novel to come
know
out.
the adult novel is coming out in February of 2020. The second,
Oh.
yeah, so that's sooner. Yep.
So that's the one for me. So I will absolutely read that. Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
thank you to our listeners. Our website is www.immigrantlypod.com. Come back next week when we have another inspiring story. And in the meantime, stay connected.